Earlier today, Senate Republicans unveiled their bill for police reform. There are some key differences between what the Senate Republicans are introducing and what House Democrats are introducing, but there's also a lot of overlap. So we want to bring in Indiana Senator Mike Braun. Senator, you are a co-signer to the bill. You are also a Republican. I want to ask you, at today's press conference, some other members of the Senate got up and acknowledged that, hey, it's not a perfect bill. There's some things that they would have liked to seen added, but it's something that they feel should be able to get bipartisan support. What do you like about this bill? What do you not like about it? And are you hopeful that the Democrats will get on board?
So you mentioned a perfect bill. I've been here a year and a half, and I don't think I've seen anything close to that. But when it does get discussion from the president, which we saw the executive order that he put out yesterday, where we're coming at it as a Republican conference, and we've seen what the Democrats have had out there. I call it the watershed moment, and it needed to occur because of the horrific incidents that occurred with George Floyd and here again with Rayshard Brooks. So I'm glad we're doing it. There is a lot of commonality to it. Let's talk about the three things that I think were the most difficult issues for any of us. And it depends on how much you want to be out there to tackle this in the present. It would have been the no-knock entries, qualified immunity, and then what do you do with chokeholds or knee holds? So the president came out yesterday and suggested banning the chokeholds. That's part of the Democrats' bill. And to be honest, if that is in there or not in the Republicans, it wasn't earlier, and I haven't read the final draft of the bill. I'll do that here soon, and I am a co-signer on it because in general, I believe that we need to do something. When it comes to no-knock entries and qualified immunity, the Democrats want to eliminate qualified immunity. I've got a bill that I'll be introducing, hopefully with some Democratic support and some Republicans, that talks about reforming it. I think it's a non-starter if we try to eliminate it. And a lot of this has evolved over time from police unions, of course, been reinforced in the courts. So we're making headway, and I think the good news is something hopefully will happen to where if nothing gets across the finish line, it's going to be so typical of this place in general where we can't come together on at least the common parts of what would be in both bills.
Senator, understanding that you and the Democrats have these competing bills, but you are attempting to find some middle ground, the question still has to be asked, and I know it's been asked of both sides of the aisle. So I'll ask you specifically, do you believe that there is an issue of systemic racism that exists in police departments across the country? And do you believe that African Americans are treated differently by police officers than white citizens of this country?
So the word systemic racism has been out there for a long time and brought into real focus now. I think racism, sadly, is still part of our culture, and how deeply it goes into the police force versus any other aspect of our culture, that's hard to measure. I think that there have been improvements, but when you look at the data, you can't deny it. African Americans were, like when you look at wages, that was really starting to move, I think, under the new economic policies that have been in place. But all of the data will show that we've got issues there. And to me, that's why, as a Republican, where we normally are slow to move and do not ever stick our necks out, I'm glad at least we put something out there, and I'm proud to be the one out there with the most significant bill, which is to modify, reform qualified immunity, because that, along with no-knock entries, are the real meaty issues. And yes, I think this has evolved over a long time where beyond equal opportunity, there are too many disparities, not only between with African Americans, across other demographics as well. And we need to get rid of them, especially if there's anything government's doing, to be a part of it.
It certainly seems like at the congressional level, the House and the Senate, you all are having reasonable, measured, informed conversations. There may be differences about how to move forward, but there's an attempt to sort of get to the meat of the matter. But then throughout all of this, we've been listening to the president. His tweeting, his messaging has been about law and order, heavy-handed law and order. And yes, you know, there was this executive order yesterday, but even throughout much of his speech during that, prior to the signing of that executive order, there was still a strong sort of law and order messaging that came forward. I'm wondering, you know, what's your take on the overall messaging coming from the White House and whether or not that's making your job harder?
That's the difficulty of getting anything through the meat grinder of legislation. And I think that in this case, the notable difference is that the presidents, both chambers have got something out there, and it's been done fairly concurrently with the issue out there in terms of coming to a focal point. That's different from anything I've seen. And I think there's a little possibility for this to evolve. I think as important as law enforcement is, and it's got to be one of the hardest jobs out there, and I do believe that most law enforcement officers do their job well. They suit up. Their life is at risk to some extent every day. We need to eliminate the bad apples. Whether you're emphasizing reform or you're touting how important law enforcement is, I think we got a chance to move the needle to where we reform where it needs to be done, and we don't make the job even more difficult than what it is. And that's why I think reforming qualified immunity, which takes one of the key issues, along with, it looks like there's consensus on chokeholds, knee holds maybe, no knock entry. I haven't been involved as much in that. I think Senator Paul's got a bill on it. Who knows where it'll go? I know the public consensus is pushing in a direction that something needs to be done, not like it normally happens here where it fizzles out.
But Senator, the president doesn't seem to be interested in qualified immunity. Sorry, Vlad. The president doesn't seem to be interested in altering qualified immunity. I'm going to ask you the question again. Is he making it harder for you to do your job?
That's eliminating qualified immunity. There's a big difference, and I think the Democrats want to do that. That will not make it. Reforming it, to me, is the perfect combination, because you do not want law enforcement officers having frivolous lawsuits that have become a part of our fabric across all sectors. On the other hand, when somebody loses his or her life, has their civil rights denied, we should all be for having a redress to something like that. And that's what my bill does. And maybe in this spirit of trying to do something significant and impactful rather than just studying it, that it would have a chance to coalesce around it. If not, it'll be out there for discussion. So there's no guarantee on any of this. It would take a lot of things to align, and hopefully this will be different.
Senator, let me switch gears and ask you about the global pandemic. The coronavirus, your state, Indiana, has seen 440 new cases of coronavirus. That brings the total for the state to 40,786. And those cases occurred between May 8th and June 15th. We're seeing some states spike. Are you at all concerned that Indiana could be next? I do note that it appears as of now, ICU beds, 40% of those and 82% of the ventilators are available. That number seems to be steady, but are you prepared? Is the state prepared for a potential spike as it starts to reopen?
So this is a fairly simple one for me. Pay a little less attention to the number of cases. The experts have said from the beginning that we'll have 5 to maybe 20 times as many as what we were actually able to test for. Look at the hospitalization rate, look at the fatality rate. If you look at both of them, those are not keeping pace with the number of new cases. Well, the argument might be made, well, give it time to see if that happens. I don't think that's probably going to occur on account of two things. I think we're protecting the most vulnerable better now. We should have done that much better early out, but we didn't know and have the advance notice of it. We didn't know the fact that elderly with comorbidities were going to be so susceptible. So I think we're going to have to get along with doing two things. The economy, we can see how drastically it was hurt. I believe the recovery is going to be basically a function of those that were doing two things at once. And I think that's going to be obvious that we're going to see more cases because we're testing more. Look at the hospitalization rate. Look at the fatality rate. If they don't follow the number of cases, we have got the right rhythm to get through opening up our economy, waiting on therapeutics, and a vaccine, because those are the three variables that take us to a conclusion at some point.
Senator, the president will be holding a rally in Tulsa on Saturday, and of course, we're still dealing with the pandemic, as you just sort of pointed out. Do you think it's wise to be holding that rally?
I think it's unwise if you hold a rally or any big venue event with people crowded inside unless you've got strict, stern protocols in terms of masks and distancing. So I think otherwise you're asking for trouble. And also, I think if you have any propensity for or susceptibility to, obviously you don't go to the rally. I think, again, it's part of what we're going to have to do. I did a couple floor speeches back in late March talking about this very dynamic and the whole saga of COVID-19. At some point, we're going to have to take a little risk, do two things at once, and if we had done that better from the get-go, I think we would have progressed into a better place now. And in some places, there was too much emphasis on one-size-fits-all, early shutdowns, late removal of them, and I think you'll find that that is going to hurt recoveries. It's an interesting straddle. We got to pay attention to the experts, not give back to the disease, do two things at once.
Senator Mike Braun, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for making some time for us.
You're welcome.